Let's get started, and other people will join the call. We've had 80 registered shortly. Welcome, everyone. I'm Ted Jackson. It's my honor to serve as chair of the Group of 78. We're a Canadian nonprofit foreign policy group. We're working for peace and security action on our examines two themes that are really important to us. One is transitioning away from fossil fuels and also advancing gender equality by redefining development to meet this global moment. So we're thrilled today to host this webinar. We have participants, registrants from a dozen countries online, and an all-star lineup of panelists from around the world who, through the Clean Energy for Development Initiative, funded by IDRC, will talk about their research on how micro and small businesses can enable a transition to clean energy that is not only sustainable, but also gender equitable. I'll introduce our moderator in a moment, but first must pay tribute to the land on which this webinar is taking place. The Group of 78 acknowledges we live, work, and play on the sacred, ancestral, and unceded territory of many diverse and distinct Indigenous communities, including the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. We recognize the harm that past and present colonial systems perpetrate on this land and its peoples. G78 supports the full implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and looks forward to learning how to live and work in community with Indigenous peoples, councils, and organizations. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Bipasha Barua is a professor and Western Research Chair in Global Women's Issues at the University of Western Ontario, Western University. Dr. Barua conducts interdisciplinary research on gender, economy, environment, and development. She serves frequently as an advisor to international development and environmental protection organizations. Bipasha is one of Canada's, and I would say the world's, best scholar practitioners and most important voices at the intersection of clean energy, gender, and justice. Welcome, Bipasha, and over to you.
Thank you, Ted, for your very generous introduction, and welcome to this webinar, How Small Businesses Can Enable a Gender Equitable Energy Transition, Insights from the Global South. First of all, thank you to Ted for giving us the opportunity to give this webinar as part of the G78's webinar series and advocacy for a global transition out of fossil fuels. So this webinar grew out of our interest in wanting to discuss how a transition out of fossil fuels might, in addition to reducing carbon emissions, present opportunities to bridge global economic divides and create new possibilities for promoting inclusivity and building a sustainable and just future. So the Clean Energy for Development Initiative, or CEDCA, which is the acronym, is funded by the International Development Research Centre of Canada, so IDRC, and it has supported 12 research projects that operate in 27 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Central and South America, and the Middle East and North Africa. These research projects are investigating how small businesses can drive and benefit from energy transitions while enhancing economic prospects for women and youth. So we're particularly interested in the potential that small businesses, or micro, small, and medium enterprises, hold to generate employment and entrepreneurial opportunities via the transition to clean energy, because they are known to be powerful engines and force multipliers for poverty alleviation and social mobility. So as just one example, the Economic Research Forum, which led one of the 12 CEDCA projects and is represented here today by Yasmin Arabi, reported that in countries in the MENA region, in Middle East and North Africa, small businesses represent 90% of all firms and 60% of all employment. So we have representatives from 4 of the 12 CEDCA projects here today as speakers, and representatives from the other projects are also in attendance and will participate in the discussion. We would have liked to have more representatives, but that would have made for a very unwieldy panel, which is why we chose 4. We'll start with brief presentations about the 4 CEDCA projects, followed by a panel discussion between the 4 speakers and the representatives from the other CEDCA projects. And of course, we'll also have Q&A with the audience members. You can also use the chat feature to make comments or ask questions at any time, and I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. So without further ado, I'd like us to start the presentations. You have the bios. I'm not going to read them again. We'll just start with Yasmin Arabi from the Economic Research Forum, followed by Eugenia Castellao, Leonard Hasu, and then Nung Nguyen. Thank you.
Thank you, Vipasha, and Ted for the introduction and the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm going to go through directly a deep dive into our project. My name is Yasmin Arabi, and I'm here representing the Economic Research Forum, which is a network-based organization in Cairo, Egypt. And we're specialized since '93 into developing and promoting high-quality economic research, hoping it can push further the sustainable development in the Arab countries. And today I'm here to share with you the findings of our project, which focused on the role of micro, small, medium enterprises in fostering inclusive and equitable economic transformation under the umbrella of renewable energy transition or clean energy transition, focusing on the MENA countries. So the project mainly, the project was implemented by the Economic Research Forum in cooperation with LCPS, which is a center in Lebanon, and Middle East Institute, which is, most of you, of course, know it in the Washington, D.C. And the project was set off to try to understand and enhance our knowledge when it comes to energy transition in 6 MENA countries, basically Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia, and Sudan. We wanted to know if the basic question was how energy transition can actually help build a strategy, and we can provide evidence on they can promote actually or policy and present policy initiatives so that we can see if we can have an tangible result saying that clean energy transition can support job creation and can have an impact on vulnerable groups, basically gender and youth. So we wanted to start by assessing renewable energy transition and its impact on job creation. We want to understand better the regulatory and policy frameworks existing, that we can tailor all of this into a policy or low-hanging fruit, which is a policy roadmap for stakeholders on how they can actually integrate clean energy transition policies and strategies and combine it with its effect, if the evidence supported that, with job creation for vulnerable groups. The project was actually a very big project. It was over 2 years period, and the results were phenomenal. We started with a gender baseline review where we actually looked into the gender gaps, where we started looking into a number of topics, which was mainly we wanted to understand what are the gender key challenges under renewable energy, and we map it all together in one product. And we work together hand in hand with a country renewable energy portfolio for each and every country. And then we did what was actually very unique, which is collection data, qualitative and quantitative, from micro, small, medium enterprises and key stakeholders, which is one of the first times we avail this kind of information about micro and small, medium enterprises in the region. And once we started having the findings from the data collection, we started tailoring different, let's say, scenarios and narratives. We had narratives and papers and what we call thematic papers, looking at the cross-cutting issues like gender, energy supply and demand, job creation, and geopolitical matters, and its impact on the green transition. And in parallel, we started tailoring the storyline per each country of the 6 targeted countries. And then we made sure that while developing these 2 papers, these 2 scenarios, these 2 narratives, we made sure that the local and regional stakeholders are engaged throughout webinars, throughout one-to-one meetings, throughout policy events, so that eventually we had a regional report, which is a storyline for the whole project done, and we can actually share with you the findings of it. I didn't want to have a very deep dive into the studies and the national. It's a huge work, and I encourage everyone to go through the website. But to tap on the findings, which is very relevant to our discussion today, which is jobs, skills, and where our vulnerable groups stand. The findings are actually very positive, and we were extremely happy when we did the analysis of the data. So what we can ensure, and the findings of our research did, is that we can ensure that clean energy transition, and by ensuring that the countries actually achieve their pledged targets, whether in renewable energy, which we have an average of 30% of renewable energy in their mix, or energy efficiency targets. The estimates shows that by 2050, if the targets are achieved, we're looking actually into 1.2 million jobs just by increasing the jobs to or by achieving the 30% target. And as you can see in the figures over here, the implication is very, very positive. And the findings from our research also was very interesting, because it told us that for the type of jobs, what kind of jobs, there are direct and indirect kind of jobs that can come from integrating renewable energy or moving forward with the national plans for renewable energy transition. And it's just a multiplier effect was extremely interesting, because the findings from our research said that for every direct job in renewable energy, we can see the implication of creating 2 to 3 indirect jobs, whether we're talking about logistics, administration, or hospitality. All of this is in relation to only integrating or applying, actually increasing the share of renewable energy to just 30% in every country. And it actually, we went extra in a deep dive saying that what kind of jobs? We're not just looking into technology or skills, or the jobs can actually be in installation and maintenance. These kind of jobs, we're talking about research and innovation. We're talking about green manufacturing, also energy efficiency related jobs. And we're talking about training courses and developing courses for skills and development. All of these kind of jobs showing on the left over here, off-grid and rural energy access, and the tops for maintenance and all of that can actually we were able to target them and present them to the national stakeholders and the regional stakeholders. So through our job, we feel we're very lucky to be able to present a roadmap for green and inclusive energy transition. And our map basically focused on promoting awareness and educational skills. This is extremely important, because the findings, which I can actually, once we get into the panel session, I can give you a deep dive into some of the statistical and findings, but all of these tailored roadmaps come together to sort of answer to the key barriers we found out, whether related to awareness, microfinances, or policies. So these 4 pillars are what we think it's very important. It's very important to include the informal policies. We were trying over here to talk about formalizing renewable energy incentives and providing pathways for that. It's very important to provide credit and training courses for informal micro small SMEs and the partners, so that they get integrated over there. Awareness is extremely important, because the findings from the data we collected highlighted this as a key barrier. People might know about the general information that renewable energy is good, but they are unaware of the technicalities of it, the technologies, which one fits their business more. And we're talking, of course, one of the very important finding was, and we presented that you need tailored strategy by sector. You can go to agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing, and tailor this. And actually, Arab countries can learn from each other because we have a flagship country like Morocco in this matter. And again and again and again, we're trying. One of the key findings over here is move beyond fragmented fossil-based energy modules, integrate renewable energy when it comes to policy coherence, and try to make one policy feeding in all the sectors that you have in mind. So this is in a nutshell the findings we did, and this is the scan. If you can scan the QR code over here, we have more than, I think, 7 thematic papers and 6 country case studies, in addition to the policy briefs available and policy articles. So this QR code will take you directly to it, and the data sets, which is again the first time we avail this kind of data. And Bipasha, I think it's best to wait till the end of our colleagues' presentation to deep dive into the questions of the panel. And thank you, everyone, and I'm here for any questions.
Thank you, Yasmin. And next, let's have Eugenia from Eugenia Castelao Carona from Fundación Bariloche in Argentina.
Yes, thank you, Bipasha. First, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I would like to thank also the gender research team of Generis, Paola Portillo, Matilde Luna, and Soledad Perez. I am part of the coordination board of Generis, but they are the ones who did the hard work. Let me start by pointing out that over the past 2 decades, Bolivia has made real progress in rural electrification. Today, nearly 2/3 of rural households have grid connection, a rate that stands out across Latin America. But that number tells us only one part of the story. A grid connection at home does not automatically translate into effective energy access for productive work. Many small rural farms, such as fish farmers, tropical fruit processors, spice growers, operate with energy they cannot fully rely on. So our central question in the Generis project was, what does it actually take for decentralized renewable energy systems to become a genuine tool for change in these firms? In which productive uses do they make a real difference? And how can women and youth benefit from this technology? So across our fieldwork, we found that barriers to the productive use of energy operate along 4 dimensions at once. First, availability. The electricity meter is at the house, but the fish ponds that need oxygenation or the crops that need irrigation are 200 meters away. Energy simply doesn't reach the place where the actual work happens. Then reliability. In the rainy seasons, outages can last up to 3 days. Voltage fluctuations may damage equipment, and gasoline may be rationed or unavailable when it is needed the most. In addition, affordability, it's another dimension. Tariff structures don't match seasonal cash flow, and the upfront cost of any upgrade, such as wiring, buying equipment, doing the installation of the wires, has no clear financing pathways. And finally, enabling conditions. Producers often lack the technical knowledge, the right equipment, or access to credit to turn that energy into real productive capacity. So when one or more of these conditions are unmet, we call it productive energy vulnerability, the condition that persists even where nominal access exists. Who do we work with? We work with rural small productive units organized as family businesses, cooperatives, and associations, because that is what Bolivia's agri-food sector actually looks like. These producers face real constraints in terms of income, geography, and access to services, but they are not marginal to the Bolivian economy because they are the backbone of the domestic food market. They supply affordable protein, fruits, and processed foods to households across the country. So when we work to improve their energy performance, we are not solving a niche problem. we are addressing a structural failure of the energy policy with consequences for food availability, food prices, and rural livelihoods. The backbone of our research was the installation and monitoring of 11 solar PV systems and 4 solar drying systems across 13 pilot enterprises. We cover fish farming, tropical fruit and potato processing, medicinal herbs and spices, and banana flour production too. This involved several site visits, extensive interviews, and direct engagement with suppliers and government agencies to map the barriers to scaling these technologies. The clearest results of the research come from fish farming, because this is one of the first sectors where we install the renewable energy systems and the one with the sharpest short-run evidence. We find that replacing gasoline power oxygenation with solar PV systems generated real net savings on energy expenditures, and it eliminated the fuel logistics chain entirely. Across all fish farming sites, including one with over a year of operation, 0 technical failures were reported, and producers link stable oxygenation to better fish survival and growth. One producer even increased stocking density, and the constant fear of losing an entire batch of fish due to a power outage simply stopped being part of their daily lives. One women's group began imagining a fish powder processing venture, something that was only thinkable once energy reliability was secured. And the ergonomics of the solar systems, the ergonomics of the solar system made a concrete difference for how work gets distributed. Switching on instead of fueling and priming a combustion engine removed a practical barrier that had long excluded women from operating the equipment independently. So these are early results, but they point in a consistent direction. We see that when correctly matched to the right productive task, decentralized solar energy works, and it can generate real economic benefit for producers that some financial instruments have yet to fully recognize. Now I want to turn to what I think is the most important finding we'll discuss today. In rural Bolivia, at least, we need to let go of the assumption that there is a clean line between the household and the firm. These are domestic productive units, the same people, the same assets, the same infrastructure, and often the same physical space serves both functions at once. And that matters for energy because when energy fails, gender acts as a distributional mechanism. The adaptive strategies that keep production running are not gender neutral. What we saw is that manual tasks substitute for mechanized ones, fuel logistics overlap with care responsibilities, and the cognitive burden of managing uncertainty, planning around outages, reorganizing, absorbing the risk of losing a batch, all fall on women who were already carrying a double workload. So these costs are real and they are invisible to standard energy metrics, which usually count connections and not pay much attention to this invisible cost. So when we install renewable systems, something changed. Some women describe moving from managing scarcity to planning production. But the time that was freed up sometimes moved into other productive or community obligations. So care responsibilities did not change on its own. So to sum up, Generis shows that decentralized renewable energy has a real productive potential for Bolivia's rural agri-food firms. But realizing that potential equitably and at scale takes more than installing panels, where research points to 5 concrete things that make the difference. First, whole system interventions. energy access cannot stop at delivering the hard work. From the start, interventions need to include medium-term technical and social follow-up so the technology gets generally adopted and can adapt to each production cycle. Second, we need to measure impact in time and mental load, not just money. Time savings and the reduction of logistical uncertainty are core dimensions of energy justice that other standard indicators usually miss. Also, we need to train installers in soft skills and not just technical skills. The installation moment is critical for gender inclusion, and it's almost entirely in the hands of the installer, of the technical installer. So this team needs training in active listening, cultural sensitivity, and relationship building, because they are not just installing a system, they are entering relationships of trust with families and communities. Four, it is important to train in local and indigenous languages. Technical knowledge needs to be delivered in a language that is not that is the one of the persons who receive the knowledge, because mediation is precisely how expertise stays out of women's hands. And finally, financial instruments we need financial instruments with a gender lens. We need credit lines with flexible collateral requirements designed around the real structural constraints that rural women face. So we think that energy access alone does not guarantee equity. What matters is what comes after that, the choices we make about who participates, who gets trained, and whose actual burden actually lightens. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Eugenia. Next, I'm going to ask Leonard Hasu from the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, or UNU-INRA.
Thank you, Bipasha. And it's a privilege to be here to share our experiences and our successes, and then the key things that would be able to lead to a higher impact in terms of transition on the African continent. So I'm speaking to you from Ghana, where we have just completed a 3-year journey of what we usually call Innovate for Clean Agricultural Technologies, which is implemented by United Nations University, as you said, in partnership with Enda Energy, which is in Senegal, and then the United Nations University Operating Unit in Cote d'Ivoire. So we are excited, and we are hoping that this session would be lessons learned for all of us as we work together. All right, so the key thing at the top of all this is the fact that around 220 million people within the West African sub-region lack electricity. And that lack of electricity as well is not only that in terms of household use, but even in areas where farming is most important. And in the rural areas where most agriculture happens, the situation is even worse. The result is that smallholder farmers and processors, who usually are majority of them are women, rely on firewood, mostly the diesel-powered kind of equipment, and mostly manual labor, which doesn't help them, and it leads to a lot of drudgery. And these heavy burdens, or heaviest of the burdens, rely on the shoulders of the women. And we only look at those activities. What happens is that at the end of the day, about 40% of the produce that they produce go bad, which we usually call the post-harvest loss. Our project sat in a three critical agenda intersections. One is access to clean energy. 2 is agricultural productivity. And the third one is gender equity. And for many other institutions, and even now as most development are being carried on, we are saying that the transition is happening now. And at the center of this is the small business innovators. For us as UNU-INRA and as part of the project of CEDCA, we are saying that they are the most powerful engine for equitable change. Without them, you can have equitable change. So as a result of that, we didn't want to just work as usually people work in areas where they do development, but goes down to the grounds and then do a critical baseline assessment in all 3 countries. And in all this, we went totally about 52 countries, and so many farmers and processors were involved. But then there were so many findings. But the 3 critical ones that we want to share today with the G78 and every member that is joining is that first, the rural women agricultural work involve extreme levels of manual labor, and they need affordable technologies that reduce drudgery. Second is the fact that there is a growing pool of young innovators eager to develop on energy driven kind of activities, which is usually tied to renewable energy. But then, and you could see on the continent of Africa that many reports are coming out that there is so much youth. But then all these ones, they lack business skills, especially in the green sector or in the green economy. They lack the mentorship and most critically, the finance that is needed to be able to push it in. This is not unlike services where you could do it right from in-house, but this is a practical work you have to do. On top of that, policy is lacking behind for so many years. So it's also hindering the ability to scale up. For us to be able to do this, then we went through this, what we call the InfoCat Innovation Engine. Critical for us is to see how best each and every activity we do go through very well. The first stage is the engaged and research. So we engage to research, and we've done stakeholder mapping in all 3 countries. We did reconnaissance visits to communities that will do the project, then the baseline followed up. Then we did a national stakeholder engagement in all 3 countries, and also engaged the policymakers in the process. We also engaged experts who came on board. So in all 3 countries, there were key experts which were coming from engineering side to renewable energy to business development that were very critical in the formation of the process. Then having engaged, we know the challenge, we know the issues, what the farmers and the processors are actually looking for. Then we throw out an innovation challenge to be able to innovate and build. So in the process of the launching, we have so many outcomes coming in from innovators across all 3 countries, although we did this challenge in all 3 countries separately. Then out of that, in totality, we shortlisted 71 of them to be able to build their capacity. And the reason being that they were lacking mostly the fact that you could change from fossil fuel powered engine to renewable energy. And that had to be built, their capacity in that process. And in the course of that, we came to a process where we have to now build 20 innovations, and these were piloted in real life. These were communities where pilot innovations were sent there, or the prototype were sent there for women and men, especially women, especially when you come to the processing side. We're getting the chance to be able to look at that. And then we went further for independent organizations to do a technical appraisal to test how much emissions have been taken out, what is the energy consumption level, what is the production level which is being produced in the process. And as we see that, what are we doing now? Most of the innovations are here, but I think with time, we also get to share reports for you to be able to see how beautiful some innovators, young ones in Africa, has done a lot of things that is bringing a lot of good news to other people. And as I mentioned earlier, finance is very critical. So we gave about 148,000 USD as grant to these 20 innovators. It constitutes about 7,400 each. And thanks to IDRC for this very great support. And these innovations are out there. And as I speak with you currently, we could see about 1,000 smallholder farmers and agri-processors have gained access to clean energy. That's why I said from the beginning that the transition is happening. Over 200 policymakers who are from about, let's say 60 institutions across all 3 countries have gotten the chance to be able to be engaged. What has changed? What has been the impact? First of all, is the capacity of the innovators. And like I said, technical, entrepreneurial, gender responsiveness in terms of their design, because we were doing this specifically targeting women. And these were structured training for them as well. Practice changed. Unlike other times where you see there's an innovation coming from China, other places, and they just drop into the country, people have to adapt around it. We did something different. We went to the grounds, knew the exact challenges, and then took innovators also alongside with experts to speak with farmers the second and the third time to understand what the situation is, and then develop the innovation. So this is user-centered, it is participatory and evidence-driven approach, totally to be able to bring everybody on board. Then technology has changed. We see from there, if you see the picture on the bottom right, you could see a woman and the children, and then some hired labor. They take 10 days, 5 people to be able to finish a groundnut farm if it is done for that number of days. But then when the technology was in, you could see one woman, the owner of the farm, could do that in 1 day. So that is the change in technology use that we see from the project. Relationships has also changed. We did the multi-stakeholder trust, which also helped to bring researchers, innovators, farmers, and policymakers together. It will surprise you that at a point in time, innovators were there, but policymakers were telling them what to watch out whilst they are designing the innovation. Whilst the farmer or the processor saying that, please make sure that it's not that bulky, we can carry it around. So they have to make it mobile. So there were input from everywhere. The behavioral and attitudinal change. Some women, when we're doing the baseline, didn't know anything about renewable energy or clean energy. They became aware of it. They got to know who is doing that, and now has adopted it and are using it currently. And that is very good for us. Then the policy aspect of it has been able to go around it, done a lot of policy engagement with policymakers. Currently, there are even more policy briefs being carried out to be able to share with policymakers, and many of them are calling for meetings with us. So just almost getting to the end. So lessons learned. For us, the co-creation for us is non-negotiable. So for us to have a proper transition and having the small business owners or innovators in the center, it means that they need to blend with society. They need to blend with users to be able to do that. And they need a multi-stakeholder platform to be able to move within the activities that needs to be done. Gender inclusion for us was intentional and sustained from beginning, that we didn't do anything afterthought. We had to deliberately make sure that we targeted women in the baseline, targeted women in the implementation of the innovation, and targeted women even in areas where we know that they were quite shortened of women there. And an interesting lesson is that the Green Agritech entrepreneurship in Africa is ground zero. That means that there are a lot of things. The capacity is green. The mentoring is green. There are areas that needs to be able to build that. And for us, we did that. Energy, which I know we would get to tell more in the process of any other question that comes, that is multifunctional, that the woman doesn't just use it at there, then there's a need to use it afterwards. In closing, this is what I say. This is no longer a pilot project. This is no longer in the pilot phase. This is an ecosystem building that we need everybody on board. And we are saying that the continent can go green or transition when we provide the right mix of technical, financial, and then policy support. For us, women and youth are center in the agri-tech innovation. And this transition can become equitable by design, not just an afterthought by anyone. But then key, as we end it here, is the fact that the micro, small, medium enterprises, they are the entry point for us. And when you support them, the impact will scale across all the value chain. Thank you so much. And I hope to answer any question that will come further.
Thank you, Leonard. All three wonderful presentations. And we finally have Nung Nguyen from the Vietnam site of the Partnership for Economic Policy Project. Are you able to set up your presentation, Nung? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you see my screen now?
No, not yet.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, hi guys, it is about 9 p.m. in Hanoi, so good evening, everyone. So, my name is Nhung Nguyen from Thương Mại University, Vietnam. And today I'll briefly share the findings from our CEDCA project on solar water pump adoption among smallholder farmers in Vietnam. Yeah, we conduct a study in Dak Lak province, which is located in Vietnam's Central Highland and the country's largest coffee growing region. Now, let me start with some background. Agriculture remains a very important sector in Vietnam. About 1/3 of the workforce is employed in agriculture, and agriculture export reached around 70 billion USD in 2025. However, the sector is increasingly affected by climate changes. Higher temperatures and more frequent droughts are creating serious challenges for farmers. So this makes irrigation more important than ever. And in this context, solar water pumps offer a promising solution compared with diesel pumps. They have lower operating costs, produce no emissions, and are more reliable during the dry season. And they may also bring benefits for women as well. We know that traditional diesel pumps often require physical strength to operate, while solar pumps are much easier to use and can allow women to manage irrigation more independently. At the same time, young farmers could also benefit from this technology. That young farmers, they are generally more open to innovation, but they often face financial barriers that make adoption difficult. And this brings us to our research question that we wanted to know whether information alone can increase adoption of solar water pumps. And we also wanted to understand whether providing information to both spouses can change household decisions or not. And to do this, we conducted a randomized controlled trial involving 1,200 households across 1,020 villages. And in treatment village, farmers attended to a 30 minutes workshop about solar water pumps, which including information on cost, benefits, and financing options. At the same time, in control villages, farmers only attended a workshop on healthy lifestyle, which doesn't relate to solar water pump at all. So importantly, both husband and wives were invited in all villages. And before attending, participants did not know which topic would be presented. And this allows us to measure the effect of information very clearly. Now let me move to the findings. Our key findings is straightforward. The information workshop did not increase adoption of solar water pumps. And the estimated effect was essentially zero. We then asked a very simple question, why? And around 40% of non-adopters said that lack of money was their main barrier. And only a small share, around 7 to 10%, they mentioned lack of information. So this tells us that awareness is not the main problem here, and financial constraints are. So we look at different participation patterns, whether only husband attended, only wife attended, or both attended together. The result was the same. Adoption did not change. So let me briefly highlight the implication for women and young farmers. For women, receiving information was not enough to increase adoption. Even when wife attended the workshop, adoption remained unchanged. This suggests that access to information is only one part of the story. Many women still face financial constraints and have limited influence over large household investment in Vietnam. So we also found that women's willingness to pay was lower than men's. And it does not mean that women are less interested in the technology. Rather, it reflects differences in finance access and decision-making power. And at the same time, for young farmers, the challenge is similar. When the cost of a solar farm range from 40 to 80 million Vietnam dong, is about 2,500 US dollar. So many young farmers, it is simply too expensive without financial support. So I highlight some key insight here that equal access of information different from equal access to technology, and a just transition requires removing financial barriers, not just closing the awareness gap. And so what does it mean for policy? Our findings suggest that information campaigns alone are unlikely to increase adoption. Farmers already have access to information through the internet, social media, and local networks. In Vietnam, internet is very popular. So the real challenge is financing. So we suggest that in the future programs, we should focus more on reducing financial barriers. And to conclude, our study found no evidence that information alone increased solar pump adoption. And the main barrier is not awareness, it is affordability. And if we want to scale clean energy technologies in agriculture, so financial support will be just as important as technological innovation. So that is my end of presentation. Thank you so much for attention.
Thank you, everyone. Those were wonderfully clear presentations with very clear findings and policy guidelines, which I really appreciate. Moving on to the discussion section, I'd actually like to start with asking each of you a follow-up question. So if you could give us information that you haven't given us already in your presentations. My first one is to Yasmin Arabi from Economic Research Forum. So your project highlighted how valuable a skilled workforce is to the green transition. So first, I want to know, what are the types of skills and training that you deem most valuable for sustaining and scaling up the green transition? How can we ensure that these training programs are widely available? And is there finally sort of a win-win in terms of green employment, where employment in clean energy can also address the unemployment crisis for youth and women in the Middle East and North Africa?
Hello again, Bipasa. Well, to answer your questions, I'm going to try to time myself and count on your help if I drifted, because we have tons of evidence over here. The first one is what skills and training are most valuable. This is based on my take from the studies we have, the country case studies and the thematic papers. I think we are looking into three main skills. The first one is renewable energy technical skills. Over here, we're talking about the one related to operating, the one related to maintenance, repairing, maybe as PV solutions or systems. And then we're talking also about energy efficiency technologies, maybe decentralized systems, all of this related to electrical infrastructure. The study over here says that basically, because there are going to be more investment so that we can reach the targets, the 6 countries where we're investigators, we're talking over here about the employment generation study. Specifically, one says that renewable energy deployment will require new supporting and downstream services. So we're talking about a demand for installers, engineer, maintenance specialists, energy efficiency professionals. So this comes at the the first thing that comes to your mind, we will need technical renewable energy skills.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at the other side of the story, which is the business side, and from looking into micro, small, medium enterprises and interviewing them, and we learned that firms face barriers not related to the technology adaptation only, but rather in navigating, financing, regulation, energy management decisions. So we're thinking over here that business and entrepreneurial skills are very much needed, something related to project management, financial planning, so that they can actually see how renewable energy investments can work hand in hand in the business models they want to integrate. So this is the second one. I think business and entrepreneurial skills, so that they can take, for micro, small, medium enterprises especially, so they can take the right decisions when it comes to how to incorporate renewable energy solutions if they are looking into it. And then we're looking about something, it's not mainly skill, but I would say we need to look into something related to awareness about managerial capacities. We have a lot of studies that found that this is a key challenge. So like for Egypt and Tunisia, say that, okay, they are aware, as I mentioned before, that the renewable energy solutions are very good, but we have no idea about even the key technologies or the, let's say, pointers for regulations and economic returns and all of that. So it's not a very much of a skill, but awareness related to technical literacy, let's say, about business from business owners and manager will be very, very much helpful in scaling the adoption of renewable energy solutions. So this is the first part of the questions when it comes to skills. And I think the second part about how can these training programs be made widely available? Over here, we can look at some cases like the Moroccan case and the Egyptian case, because we think that the project findings come very strongly saying that you need to integrate this as part of, it's not just an ad hoc sort of donor driven like the case of Lebanon, but actually you need to have a theory. And you need to integrate these technical courses like in different programs. We're talking about vocational and technical education systems. We are considering SMEs and MSMEs support programs. We're talking about maybe financing initiatives over there. So it's very important that the findings from Egypt actually strongly says that it's very important that we have targeted technical education for young people so that we can accelerate adoption. So it needs to be part of a bigger policy and integrated into industrial plans. As I said, the case in Morocco and Jordan, because they have a very strong policy support and institutional capacity when it comes to advocating these skills needed. So micro, small, medium enterprises can focus more and can integrate more the renewable energy solutions and get integrated in market. I think your third question is related to if there is a win-win situation with energy employment. Well, in one sentence, our project strongly suggests that we know that more and better employment opportunity for women and young people can actually come now, and from the research and everything, that we can say that yes, it can come from deployment renewable energy solutions. As I mentioned before, we're looking into a downstream of jobs, and for every direct job, we're looking into 2 to 3 other indirect jobs. Just very quickly, I think the Egyptian case study provided some very interesting findings that young workers were, by looking into the firms and micro, small, medium enterprises, firms employing large share of young workers actually were more prone to adopting renewable energy solutions. So this is a very interesting finding about if you integrate, and you can only imagine if you integrate technical educational related to renewables, and these young fellows are actually employed, how it will unfold in the future. And when you look into the female side and women, also the Egyptian case study came up with a very interesting finding that female-owned firms are more also likely to adopt renewable energy solutions. So this is why we started thinking, okay, maybe we need to remove the barriers related to women entrepreneurs and tailor some sort of a financing mechanism for them. So from what I'm trying to say, and also the Moroccan case study is very optimistic about employment potential. I mean, emerging green industries, and saying that the ecosystem might actually expand, and therefore having more female opportunities for female and youth in sustainable industrial development. So, in a nutshell, I think all the evidence from Egypt, from Morocco, for Jordan, it actually strongly supports that there is a win-win situation. If we have a well-designed green skills program, it can stimulate advance the clean energy transition, and also help the long issue of unemployment in the MENA region. And we have number and tons of evidence produced, and actually from the research we done, and we are trying to look more into the details further and further, so that we can tailor more policies and or suggest more policies and roadmaps in this regard to the decision maker. I think I answered the question, and I would love to go in details more if necessary.
I also see, thank you. Thanks very much. Those were good responses. I also see a few comments from people. So we don't have to respond. I just want to read them out. So Arthur Shears says, Bangladesh is famous for microcredit strategies and institutions. Grameen Bank, for example. Is microcredit available in Vietnam? When we get to know, maybe you can say a bit about why microcredit may or may not be suitable for green technologies. Consider using chambers of commerce and industry to run training programs for their business members. Absolutely, that's more of a comment. And Lisa asks, are there private sector suppliers who might have an interest in distributing new technologies, who can also train and collaborate with the public sector or development actors to increase both uptake and skills? And do they understand how women can be critical to market adoption of renewable energy technologies? Very good points. And I think quite a few of our panelists would have things to say about that. Is the increased interest in adoption by women due to the sector they are in, the size of their business, or due to better awareness of the importance and value of renewables? Do you have a quick follow-up to that last question? I think that might be one that you can quickly address.
I see the final two. You're asking about, there is the question from Maggie, data why women-owned enterprises are more likely to adopt solar technologies. I think in the narrative, in the qualitative data collection in Egypt, they were just talking about the fact that they are more aware of it. So it's a qualitative question. So it's more of the narrative and hearing what they're saying and putting it in analysis. And the key remark was that whenever we interviewed a female owner, she would come and say, actually, I'm considering adopting renewable energy solutions, but these are the gaps or the challenges I'm facing. And I'm sorry, Bipasha, with regards to the private sector, this is the other question you wanted me to follow up. Actually, yes, there are some initiatives taking place, but they are more oriented towards small or medium enterprises rather than the small one and or the micro ones. And this is what we're trying to actually look, because in the countries we investigated included countries like Sudan and Lebanon, where there are actually hardships and challenges. And you're looking into a country like Jordan, where you have decentralized solutions. So we wanted to look more into solutions, and this is actually something that we are still working on, how the private sector or the PPE, the public-private partnership, can actually support not only the medium, because they have a better offset, but actually the micro and small, especially the ones owned by female. I think this will make a great support. And we see initiatives, small ones, but we're trying actually to look into scaling them up and finding leeways and solutions tailored to the national context. I hope this captures the topics, and we can go back to them so I don't take more of my colleagues' time.
Thank you. Thanks, Yasmin. I also remember where we found that, for example, in Sudan and Lebanon, in a sense, the green transition is happening despite the state rather than because of the state. It's more out of necessity, right? So we can, it's also interesting how that unfolds. Anyway, my next question is for Leonard. Leonard, your project findings revealed early on that financing is a major challenge for adoption and scaling up of green technologies, particularly in smallholder agriculture. I know that this led you, UNU INRA, to research different ways to make clean tech financing available to innovators and smallholder farmers. Can you tell us a bit more about what you found?
Thank you very much. So in the baseline, critically we started with the farmers and the processors. And then to come to the innovators, later we realized that, first of all, there are two levels when it comes to the innovation level, which is the rural farmers or the innovators, who is on one side, and then female farmers, or we call them smallholder farmers, and the processors has no access to capital to be able to even purchase if there is any kind of innovations being put in process. So they were willing, when we were doing the survey, they were willing to do that, but they realized that they don't have the financial capacity. We asked questions of even means by which they could be able to pay for it. Others, they didn't have bank accounts and all those kind of stuffs to be able to even do that. On the side of the innovators, we realized that some of them had the idea, others were young innovators, and because the project was coming from a previous project, which we call Just Transition, in the informal sector, which is justice, it means that we're looking at the informal sector innovators as well, which is very critical in this process. And then we can confirm that when we realize that case, then it means that, first of all, the financial support which came as an initial early stage grant capital was not even enough, even when you support them. So we realized in the process of giving the grant, and we had to be very clear to avoid the risk of them using the money to do other things to be able to keep themselves up. There were questions like, do we have to go and register before you give us the funding and all that? So we had to be able to direct those things and then get them into that. But then we found out that was not even enough. So that's why after the project, we have been able to still select about 6 people, 2 in every country, to give them an award, which is the least of them is $12,000. And then the first winner in every country is getting $25,000 for them to be able to now scale up. At the institutional level, we realized that the institutions also, we needed a lot of capacity to be able to help them. That is in the financial aspect of it, to be able to institute a lot of things that relates to the work to be able to make sure that they are out there. For example, you're looking at standards, you're looking at certification, you're looking at IP, all those types at the institutional level are missing. So we are looking at it to be able to have a breakthrough point. At the ecosystem level, that is the whole system in all countries, we realized that it was clear that financial inclusion instruments is much needed, and the instruments that will require. So we are still now engaging with institutions, even some of the banks, to be able to now see how best they will be able to have green loans, blended finance, early stage facilities for these smallholder farmers. And yes, the key issue here is the fact that the whole ecosystem is green, and they don't know how flexible, they don't know how they can recoup the benefit from that. And those are the things we are hoping that in the phase 2 of InfoCard, we'll be able to now give the banks the clear idea, having learned to build an ecosystem and the process that will guarantee results. So these are the areas that we look at. There are still more to be done, especially when it comes to the whole national level, and then at ECOWAS level, that is the Community of West African States, to be able to put out an institution that is able to provide this kind of funding for innovators. And still, most of their businesses are not the usual business viable or bankable when you get to the banks. So those are the areas we are looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard. To Eugenia, I have a question about your project, which focused on productive uses of clean energy in Bolivia. How effective is clean energy as a tool for livelihood generation in Bolivia? And I want you to speak particularly for women, youth, and indigenous peoples. And do you have any advice or suggestions that you could share that might be helpful for productive uses of clean energy, including indigenous people again, in other contexts outside of Bolivia?
Yes, thanks, Vipasha. I would say clean energy is effective, but conditionally. We need to find those production tasks that nowadays are depending on unreliable energy inputs, so that we can offer these firms correctly seed solar systems or renewable energy systems that can reduce their costs, that can stabilize production and open space for upgrading. what I mean with this is that we need we need to offer technologies that are tailored for each productive task, for each productive activity. Closed packages doesn't work. So if I had to offer some advice for another context, I would say that it is first, it's necessary to show producers the economic benefits of the technology clearly, because they are most of them are willing to adapt this technology, but they have doubts about the benefits they may offer. So it is important to show them how the concrete savings the technology may offer to them, how it can improve their production cycle, and how they can pass over the financial barriers that sometimes they also face. As I said before, it's also important not to take technology as a fixed package, because what works for fish farming may not work for fruit processing. So and also the technology sometimes it needs to go with other equipment. For example, in the fish farming sites, we install internal wiring to reach each pond. And we also install internet connection to facilitate the monitoring, remote monitoring. And that was key for the families too. I mean, to have internet connectivity was something very appeal to them. And so they adapted very, very, very quickly. And follow-up visits are also necessary. Follow-up training visits are also necessary. So it's not just about the panel, it's about all the complementary equipment that goes with the panel and all the technical and soft skills too that need to go along with the installation and that need to be transferred to the household or the firm that receives this technology. And finally, I would also recommend working with the existing collective structures, because the smallest firms, sometimes they share infrastructure, and sometimes they are too small to adapt the technology by their own. They may not have the scale to make the use of that technology economically viable. So we need to, if we want them to buy this technology, to be the ones who pay for the technology and to be the ones who pay for the maintenance of this technology, sometimes we need to think that they are not going to be able to do it by themselves. I mean, they have to make it as a pool in a collective way, because of the scale. So if we want the adaptation of this technology to be through the market, we need to think on collective forms of arrangements, so to say. So those will be my three advices somehow.
The finding about savings is definitely holds true everywhere, that small businesses are always much more motivated to adopt these technologies because of concrete savings, much more so than the environmental dimension, I think, everywhere. Yes. So my question to Nung next is, your project identified access to information and financing as the factors that most, especially financing, that influence clean tech adoption in agricultural households in Vietnam. Did your project find any specific considerations that are needed for women and youth to have equal access to clean tech? Is there anything specific that you would recommend that be thought of in terms of women and youth?
Yep, thank you, Bipasa, for your question. Yes, our study suggests that women and youth how farmers face different barriers, so they may need different type of support. And for women, we found that even both husband and wife attended to the workshop together, adoption did not increase. And we also found that women's willingness to pay was lower than men's. And it mainly reflects the financial constraint and more limited control over large household investment. And so for women, we think that we should provide financial support package, especially designed for women, like including preferential rate loans, group-based microcredit, and flexible installment plan that don't require land collateral or male co-signer, so they can help to support the women in order to adopt the clean technology in the future. And for young farmers, the challenge is slightly different, that due to the upfront cost for solar pump is very high. So the many young farmers also have no land title and no credit history. So in their case, I think that more flexible financing models such as leasing or pay as you earn schemes may be more effective. So I think that the main lesson is simple, that different groups face different barriers, and financial solutions need to be designed around those specific barriers.
Thank you. Those are great responses, especially thinking of leasing models and pay-as-you-go models, because there was a question about whether microfinance is available. And I think, broadly speaking, the findings seem to be that the terms on which microcredit is viable, right? So very high interest rates, frequent repayment, don't work very well with green technologies because of the high upfront costs and also the interest rates in terms of payback. So I think definitely more innovation is needed around that. So go ahead.
Yeah, honestly, microcredit exists in Vietnam, but you know that the government sometimes offer package of financial for the farmers, but you know that they require a lot of paperwork in order to get that. So yeah, it's still a big problem with small farmers, so they don't want to put too much effort in order to get that new technology. Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, very quick go around for all of you is just give us very, very briefly in a few seconds, what are 2 key takeaways from each of your projects? Who'd like to go first? Yasmin, can I go with you first?
My 2 key takeaway is, the first one is we want to mention that the financial, the information is not really a big problem in our country, and the financial is still the big problem, and we need to remove that financial barrier, not just closing the awareness gap. Yeah.
Yasmin?
Yeah, so I think the research we did is very interesting, and we're trying to top this up with the one we have a new grant, and we're trying to have a deeper look in that. I think it's very important because the cases of Sudan and Lebanon and slightly Egypt and Jordan showed us that informal economies are very important, and we want to look into it. I think when we bring the broad attention of gender and sensitivity to clean energy transition, there are tons of details and proofs out there. They just need to be segregated and delivered and tailored according to the narrative of the Arab countries and the Arab region. And we've had, I think, Bipasha, a lot of discussion about that most of the studies out there speak about key findings and challenges that doesn't actually apply to the Arab countries. So this is the key takeaways, that we do have a special narrative, and we really, really, really need to stay on track of finding the key barriers and providing solution to it. And we can learn from the international case studies out there, but we do really have a what we call a homegrown or a special flavor to the challenges, like the number of enrollment of girls in STEM. Everyone says it's the challenge everywhere. In the Arab countries, it's not. We have the highest enrollment when it comes to STEM studies, but it doesn't translate into jobs. So I think this is a key understanding, and the findings from the data and analysis shows that we really have a unique situation, and really need to keep digging at it so that we can find the right solutions, like the one suggested about PPP over here, and other solutions that can actually ensure that female enjoys the benefit of green energy transition.
Thank you. Thank you. Leonard, very quick takeaways.
Yeah, thank you. So we really appreciate this opportunity. I'm speaking like an economist, all other things held constant. We are saying that co-creation with end users is a single most important factor to know or determine whether a clean energy innovation would succeed or it will fail. Because then without that, we have most technologies coming in, and then people use it one time and go. It doesn't serve the purpose. It doesn't like a round peg in the square hole and all those kind of stuff. So the co-creation is very key. Then the last one is that the green entrepreneurship that we said it's ground zero at ecosystem level is a challenge, but also present as an opportunity for us to take advantage of and then build up in the transition process. Thank you.
Thank you. Eugenia, any little takeaways or big takeaways?
Yeah. Well, there are many, but two that are very important for me is that this idea that connection is not access to energy, and access to energy is not productive capability, because grid coverage can be huge, and it is across Latin America, but the gap between a meter on the household and the energy that reaches the productive task, the gap is there, and it is systematic. And the second one is that when we speak about when we study domestic productive units, gender determines who absorbs the cost of energy insecurity, and also who captures the benefits when that energy improves, when that energy access improves. So policies that track the aggregate access without attending the internal distribution of the energy in the firms, but also in this household articulation with the productive space, they will systematically miss the. They will systematically how can I say this? They won't close the gender gap. I mean, if you don't pay attention to this distributional mechanism, you won't be closing the gender gap that you want to close.
Yeah. I think
those are very key issues. Yeah, sorry.
I think that's a great point, because even the definition of, I find, 100% electrification, which a lot of countries are using now. I work in India, for example, and you hear it all the time, that the Modi government has achieved 100% electrification. And it's true, but you have to look at the definition of 100% electrification. It's not every household in every village. It's reaching a household. And then inevitably, there are also gender differences in that. Often it reaches parts of the household where men are more likely to use, less likely to reach the kitchen, for example. So I think it's very important to question the idea of 100% electrification and what it actually means. Thank you, everyone, very, very much. I've been trying to get at questions as I go along, and there are still a few, mostly just comments about excellent information and what have you. We have a few more minutes left now, and I would like to just broadly ask, if the audience has questions, any further questions. Also, generally, I found that across the CEDCA cohort, we found that men tend to have higher access to clean energy technologies, innovation, and policy making. So I think the big challenge is, how can we ensure that women aren't always relegated to the lower rungs of the clean energy sector? How can we ensure that women are also well represented in tech, design, innovation, and policy making? I think that's a big challenge going forward. So I'll leave now the floor open to anyone from any of the other CEDCA projects, or to audience members who might have a question. We have a very little time left. I'm sorry, it was all so interesting. It was hard to cut people off. Does anyone have anything they would like to add?
Yeah, I would like to add something very quick. So, I mean, basically saying this, I mean, we usually use the word be intentional, do this, make sure you deliberately do that, and then you could give quota system and all that. But the truth is that this is a structural barrier, and then these barriers must be addressed. We would say address it simultaneously and not sequentially. So sometimes you get to a point in education, you realize that education doesn't have it. So when you come to the social norm, so we are saying, let's do it simultaneously at the structural level, where we tackle it at the barrier level, at the educational level, at the finance level. Also, there are barriers to women getting involved. The social norms, which prevent a lot of access to, even in our cases, land and all that. And then access to network at the same time. So these structures where we see the barriers of women, especially not being included or excluded in a way, we have to address them at the same time, and that would help. For us as a project, we are just saying that we should position the woman as an innovator and not just a beneficiary. For us, then that will be very key.
Thank you. There was a comment, and I can come back to Yasmin on that. Why is it that women are more interested in taking up, renewable energy in your study of the firms? I seem to remember, Yasmin, there was also a correlation between age, the age of the woman, and also a very interesting point you made that, STEM education is actually levels of accomplishment for women are very high in countries in the Middle East. They're at levels that industrialized countries should aspire to, right? But there's that huge gap between education and employment. So if you have anything to say to that about why do you think that there's more interest among women in adopting the technologies, and what do you see any variation by age?
We did have a variation by age, but I think it wasn't big enough to make it as a stand out point, because the numbers of the interviews were actually huge. I think, and I can get more details. I just shared the details. For the quantitative data collection, I think we interviewed in a total up to 4,000 companies, and in the qualitative, it was more key informant interviews and focus group discussions. So the numbers to generate results, it's not really right to do that, except for the firms related answers. And related to the other questions you just mentioned about the gap in the enrollment versus, I think the studies didn't capture yet, because all the studies that we see, like IRENA's and all of that, when they focus on the region, they do not really do the same analysis, or they don't have the same analysis. IRENA mentions that enrollment is high, but then they go to admin related and logistic related jobs. For instance, in the Arab region or the North African region, we don't have the segregated information so that we can actually make the concrete findings saying that, okay, the enrollment stages are very high, but are they projected in the job opportunities or not when it comes to renewable energy? So I think it's more the type of job like this one funded by IDRC. It's the one actually laying the ground and pinning the Arab countries and the North Africa countries and the MENA region, well, however you want to call it, it's pinning it there and providing answers, because the remarks from the qualitative said that females are more prone, and it's not just that. I think IEA had a similar study saying that because females consider the consequences, and the more you have female on the management board, the more you're going to see transition towards renewable energy, because they understand that the females or oriented micro, small, medium enterprises owners play two things. We call them producers and consumers. So it's really very important that we keep this in mind. And if you go to the segregated level, you can see that in decentralized regions like Sudan and Lebanon, where we learned, females were actually more keen on doing this because it translates into money. If I'm working in a remote area and I use solar solution, I'm going to make sure that I have electricity, do another job, and then it's going to be income generating sort of a solution. So I think we need to keep working to be able to answer these kind of questions once and for all with available data, and we can actually say that this is a challenge in the region, or it's just as you mentioned, in the industrialized countries or the northern side of the sphere. But when it comes to the southern countries, it's not that narrative. We have to find out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anything else? Any final words from anyone, from the audience, from other CEDCA project participants? One of the things I found interesting also that you all mentioned was how important it is to think about the informal sector and the transition, the green transition in the informal sector, because that is what constitutes the vast amount of employment in many countries. And it's not as straightforward as let's all make them all formal firms so they can now pay taxes and register themselves. They don't want to in many cases, and there are very good reasons why they don't want to. And that's why the informal sector has existed in the size and scale that it has, forever, right? So I think that's a very important challenge going forward, is how to work in sort of a productive way with the informal sector so that they actually benefit from the green transition and can contribute to it. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions or comments at this point. So I'm going to invite, just so we stay on time, I'm going to invite Ted back to give the vote of thanks. Okay, so Ted apparently is having connectivity issues, so please go ahead and close. Well, I'll do that. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. This was quite a lovely audience, and thank you so much to the panelists. I mean, it was really interesting. Your findings were very interesting. I know the projects really well, and even I learned a lot. So I hope that people who are hearing about CEDCA for the first time got a lot out of this session. I also want to say that there is a lot more information on the CEDCA website, which we can share. If Jessica's on the call, if you wouldn't mind sharing the link, which is the Institute for Development Studies is doing the knowledge translation for the project. So they have a whole website, a lot of information. And of course, each of the projects, if you go to there, if you Google them, you'll also find ERF, for example, has all their reports online already. So there's a lot of information that can be found from the websites. And Jessica has just shared in the chat the website for all of the knowledge products that are emerging from the CEDCA initiative. So I'm going to close right on time. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to our audience, whether it was good morning, good evening, good night. I'm not sure quite what to say because we have participants from so many countries around the world. And thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone for participating.